The legal instruction canceled mod dropped yesterday, and in this video I want to give you the backstory of each of the characters that actually got released and the scrapped and unused characters. And at the end of the video, I'll let you know why I think the mod actually got canceled. Now, the first character that we need to talk about on this list is going to be Duke, and Duke is basically like another version of Lord X / Sonic.exe. When we look into Duke's backstory, it literally says that he's built off space fragments and also void matter. And if you remember anything about Lord X, he's also from space and built from the void. And just like Lord X, Duke is able to take on any appearance that he wants, but in this universe, he actually decides to take on the appearance of Knuckles instead of Sonic. And something that does separate Duke from Lord X though, is that while Lord X wants your soul, Duke just wants power. And he's willing to use and double cross anybody that he needs to in order to get that power. And he doesn't really care what type of mental or physical distress that he puts people in, because he has no real feelings for people. He just wants to get stronger. And I think this really plays into a quote that he says, which is, "Without a king, there are no god." And it plays into this concept that he does not want to be a god. He doesn't want to be somebody that's in the sky or somebody who's mystical or magical. He wants to be very much on the ground, ruling over people like a tyrant king. Now, the reason that I said that he's also kind of like Sonic.exe is because I believe that his backstory is basically that of Sonic.exe, in the sense that there was a game disc that was being passed around, and eventually a young man gets it, plays the game, and instead of finding the regular Sonic game, he actually gets Sonic.exe. In this sense though, he actually gets Duke. And instead of there being Tails, Knuckles, and Dr. Robotnik, he runs into people like Espio, Charmy B, Vector, and Mighty the Armadillo. And these are basically the people that he unalived in his video game. And if the mod would have not been canceled, these are the Soul characters that we would have seen. So kind of like Soul Tails, Soul Knuckles, and Soul Dr. Robotnik. Up to this point, the only Souls character that was actually able to be completed was Soul Espio. And he's basically just the dead version of Espio and the first victim to fall from Duke. If the mod would have been completed, he would have appeared in a song called The Final Frontier. And if you're wondering what type of animal he is, he's actually a chameleon. The next character on our list is called NormalCD, and this is a character that was actually created by another Sonic-like character named Revived Sonic. And his backstory is short, but it's kind of interesting. He was basically created for a project called Project Glass Cannon, and the experiment was to make life out of soul glass. But it seems that Revived actually thought that this character turned out to be a monster, so he banished him to the void. Which is kind of sad, because I don't get the feeling that this character is actually evil, but we don't have the full backstory, so we don't fully know. A kind of good fact about this though is that when he was cast out to the void, it seems that he met Curse Sonic and a couple of other people, so at least he's not alone. The next three characters are probably familiar to you. That's because they are Chaotix, Curse, and also Hog and Scorch. Let's start off with Chaotix. Now, even though Chaotix looks like Knuckles, he's definitely not him. It seems that Chaotix was inspired from the Wachinia glitch that originated from a Sega game called Knuckles Chaotix. Also notable is that Chaotix only has one eye. Unlike Knuckles, he doesn't have the crescent on his chest, and his color scheme is obviously way brighter and lighter than Knuckles. Chaotix's backstory goes like this. Chaotix is the leftover remnants of a broken data and code that was left for Tails in the Knuckles Chaotix game. He is a sentient character that only wishes to become whole again, and he will do that by any means necessary, because he basically wants to be back to his full glory. The scariest thing about him is that he's unstable and reckless, and he even has a second form called his beast form. If Chaotix believes that he's found a Mobian that has his missing data, he'll go into this beast form. Now, his beast form is about 5'11", which towers over most Mobians because they're about 3 feet tall. And to make matters worse, if he unalives any of these Mobians, he can bring them back as his undead servants, very similar to what Sonic.exe can do. The next character on our list is going to be Hog / Scorch, and this character is actually an EXE that was created by Jack Gore, and he's basically supposed to be a bootleg copy of Sonic. Some interesting facts about Hog is that he doesn't actually have a creepypasta in which he comes from. He was an EXE that was made specifically for Friday Night Funkin'. Now, the most interesting thing about Hog and Scorch is that technically they are different characters, but they share the same body. The most simple way I can wrap my mind around this is thinking about the Banner and the Hulk. They are obviously different characters, but they both reside in the same body. And while Hog is kind of cute sitting at only 3 feet tall, Scorch looks like a monstrous werewolf standing at 13 feet tall, meaning that this character is huge. The next character on our list to talk about is going to be Curse. Now, the first thing to note is that Curse is technically Sonic the Hedgehog, and in his backstory, he lived a pretty normal life just like the regular Sonic, and that is until one day he got caught in a landslide. Sonic was able to survive the landslide, but one of his legs was pretty much ruined. The damage was so bad that Sonic could never be able to run at the same speed that he did before, and if he would even attempt that type of speed, he would basically make it to where he could never use his leg again, meaning that he can't even walk. And I think this may be part of the reason that we see Curse with the bandages around his legs. At first I thought he was supposed to be like Boom Sonic, but now that I know the backstory, it makes a lot more sense. To make matters worse, Knuckles was with him when this landslide happened, and Knuckles did not make it out alive. Once the public and even some of Sonic's friends found out about this, they blamed Sonic for the death of Knuckles. The most surprising of these people was Tails, because Tails was always like Sonic's right-hand man. But Tails starts to harass Sonic, bully Sonic, and even stalk Sonic so that he will never forget that he's the reason that Knuckles is no longer alive. And just to make it clear, it wasn't Sonic's fault that the landslide happened, so obviously it wasn't his fault that Knuckles is not alive. Another surprising fact about this is that Sonic finds an unlikely ally in this universe in Dr. Eggman. Seeing that Sonic is getting so much hate, Dr. Eggman actually retires from being a criminal and decides to use the rest of his life and his money to help Sonic live more comfortably. He basically uses all his badniks and Metal Sonic to help make sure that Sonic is safe, and he also sends them out to kind of take Sonic's place and help out society as a whole, since now obviously Sonic can't be the hero that he was. Now, to make matters even worse, at this point Sonic is inflicted with something called the Curse of X, and what this curse basically does is unalives people that are close to Sonic. Now, Sonic tries to hide away from the world, living with his friend Sally, and of course being protected by Dr. Robotnik, but eventually the curse catches up to him and ends up taking the life of Sally, which of course was traumatizing to Sonic because Sally was one of his best friends. The next person to be taken out after that, of course, was Dr. Eggman, which was another blow because this man basically changed his whole life and his evil ways to try to help Sonic in his time of need. In the end, Metal Sonic and Curse were able to get together and get Dr. Eggman's portal gun to open up a multi-dimensional portal that Sonic could go into to try to escape all the people that hated him and possibly the curse. The sad part here though is that it seems that no matter where he goes, this curse is now a part of him, which makes sense considering that his name is Curse. One thing that I find kind of inspiring about Curse though is that even though he has this horrific life, he is still very friendly and he's always kind of a ray of sunshine to other people, especially when you compare him to any other EXE character. The next character that we're going to talk about is called Phantom Arma, and that's supposed to be short for Phantom Armadillo, I believe, because he's actually Mighty the Armadillo, but he's been influenced by the power of the Phantom Ruby. So the backstory for this is actually kind of interesting because the Phantom Ruby basically uses Mighty's insecurities in order to manipulate him to do his bidding. One day the Ruby actually is whispering to Mighty, telling him that this is all a game, this is all a trick, and that his friends are actually leaving him in the dark. They know the truth. And Mighty gives in to this insecurity and listens to the stone. And eventually the stone is able to infuse with Mighty, turning him into Phantom Arma. And now one of his major abilities is being able to cast illusions over the world, basically traumatizing people and making them do violent acts. Even though this backstory is really dark, I kind of like that they took this idea of like a side character who isn't really in the main franchise and kind of used that insecurity that you may have as a sidekick to make a interesting story about how that person can be manipulated. Now, something else that I found interesting about this mod is there were two other playable characters outside of Boyfriend, the first one being Metal Sonic and the second one being Amy. Now, we don't know much about the backstory here, but we know that Metal Sonic and Amy team up to fight against NormalCD, and they basically turn him into scrap. We also know by looking into the files that Ray the Flying Squirrel was also supposed to be in this mod, but he ended up being scrapped or rejected. There's also a lot of less known Sonic.exe-like characters, the first one being Demigry. This character is interesting because apparently they used to be an angel whose whole purpose was to entertain the god, until one day this person actually falls from heaven on accident, and as they're attempting to return, they actually get captured by this type of demon. The demon's name is Chaotix, and this is actually another character that we'll talk about in a moment. But when Demigry gets captured, they actually rip off his wings so that he cannot return back to heaven, and they basically force him to be a servant down in hell, making him capture the souls of innocent people. And it's kind of a sad backstory because this person was actually a very kind soul and they are forced to do evil acts. The next character that we'll talk about is Chaotix, and unlike some of these other EXE characters, he doesn't try to hide his demonic form. He actually roams the human world, and if he is going to disguise himself, he does it as making himself a thick cloud of fog. He's absolutely cruel, and his whole purpose is just to consume human souls, which is why he makes Demagogue do his bidding. There are a couple of other EXEs here, but they aren't as fleshed out as these two, so I'll probably report on them as we get more information about them. Now, the reason that I think this mod ended up being cancelled is because a lot of it was being leaked online. And I feel like for a lot of mod developers and teams in general, it's really hard to keep working on a project when you have people seeing early builds of that project and giving negative feedback on something that isn't even a final product. And in my opinion, I can understand why that would take away a person's drive to actually make mods for a community who's going to continuously leak their work. Now, it seems that there may have also been some internal conflicts along with making this mod, and I think that's pretty common in the Friday Night Funkin' community. But since I don't know all the details about those engagements, I'm not really going to talk on them. But what I will say is that it is sad to see so many mods being canceled lately. Now, if you enjoyed this video, check out this video on the screen here. Subscribe today to become a member of the Orseofkorse, and we'll see you tomorrow with another one. Peace, peace.